Dude, we haven't done a design time since last year.
The kids already got on that one. They're like, you haven't pulled us on the sled in a year. The kids even got the jokes. I'm gonna make a quick axis through this. You could actually film this as part of design time. We might as well actually do something that shows a bit of the design. You're gonna be shown a really big mistake too, which is cool. I didn't officially build anything, so it's totally fine to run into problems with your designs because you can still fix them, right? So you gotta run through the simulation, make sure there's no interferences, and we found some interferences because I slightly jumped the gun, although I was kind of just trying to get a model in place so that I could use it, but you're gonna find what I'm talking about here. We want to have axes traveling through the control arms. And the reason for that is so we can view roll center, converging lines, intersection points, anti-squat, all sorts of things that are gonna look cool and behave so that we can actually follow these and track them and trace them and graph them basically. So I'm gonna just create an axis through this control arm. Typically, control arms are a little bit harder, like if you're dealing with an OEM control arm and a scan file, but because this arm has many circular parts that are all in line with its axis, we can really simply just put an axis through cylinder, basically like this, and then I can just, you can see this construction line here. So essentially I can drag the axis longer and we can get our lines. Sometimes it's hard to click on them. There we go. Okay, so we have our axis through the line, so we're gonna save that, drop it into our assembly, we bring it over, and we can now joint this control arm as if we were bolting it into the subframe. So we'll put the spacer where it needs to go, here. And then we will put the control arm onto this spacer as if we're bolting her in. And we now have some nice converging lines. And I can just drag them longer. You can see the intersection point here. If I move the wheel, we can easily track where everything's going. Cool, very cool. You can see how the BMW behaves. But the problems, like I said at the beginning, we have a couple interferences. We have this slight interference with the upper, which our upper control arm cleared perfectly fine, but Adam runs the OEM upper and he intends to continue to run the OEM upper, and look at that. The OEM one doesn't clear. So this, boys and girls, is why you gotta simulate way more than what you think in order to have the result you want. The other thing is this interferes as well. Now, because this is on an articulation, if this was a bushing like it is factory, it probably would be fine because the bushing doesn't have much articulation, so the arm's rotation it won't rotate very much. But because this is on a ball joint, it will likely run into this, so I have to actually move this somewhere else. I need to move it over in, 10 millimeters or something. So two relatively easy fixes, but otherwise, the whole assembly is really, really nice. We have our toe adjustment point here that has lots of room. We're gonna be able to clear everything. Adam was telling me, or the team was telling me, they prefer to max out the toe arm bucket here all the way toed in, because impacts typically slip these joints anyways. So they want to max this out on the inward position, and then they want to have additional toe from this point. So the additional toe, they said, I'm not going to say what they run, but they basically run a fixed point and they are happy with where that is when these are all the way in. So we're going to allow for more toe from there. So if I unlock this, we're able to get that toe adjustment, and you can really see the toe change here. So that's an additional amount of adjustment that they have, and I'll just relock that because it kind of makes the simulation a little tricky. And yeah, that's basically it. One thing I need to figure out how to do, which I will figure it out, I just haven't done it yet. I need to somehow have a constraint that keeps the axis of the wheel intersecting the ground plane. I might be able to do this with some kind of a constraint. See this axis here. This is what I want to always point down, so that that's my tire contact position, so that I can trace additional kinematics and find more converging lines. But I haven't figured out how to, so obviously I would put a revolute constraint on the wheel so the wheel can actually rotate, but I need some kind of a constraint that keeps it pointing down. And because the tire changes camber, changes toe, changes everything, I can't just simply make a contact patch flat with the ground, because it'll never be flat. It'll never be always perpendicular or parallel to the ground. So that one's going to be tricky. I haven't figured out how to do that yet. I might have to get with the Fusion Autodesk team to come up with an idea. It'd be really great if there was some kind of a gravity constraint where you could just apply an alignment so that this always aligns with gravity. They kind of have that with FEA and other generative design. There's always a gravity function to those, so it does exist, but I haven't been able to figure it out. So I know that may be above some of your heads, but maybe we'll get a comment where somebody's had to do something similar, because nobody's perfect. We don't know everything, but that is essentially what we're going to be going over as well, is the design of this knuckle in my seminar tomorrow. Wednesday, January 7th, we're going over how to build this. So I'm going to make these tweaks, and then we're going to do it all again tomorrow evening. As far as other components for design time, I mean, we have this wheel and tire. Let's open this up. This is pretty cool, this wheel and tire. So this is a patterned tire, basically went off of the Zeknova tread pattern. And it might be easier if I change the display settings. This is a tread pattern that I just created with a pattern, essentially. A pattern and then a mirror. So that was the easiest way to do that. And so it's an emboss on, I had embossed one tread. So if I use the timeline, actually, we can see this better. So essentially I did an emboss of this one pattern, and then I created a circular pattern. And basically you can just specify how many you want. In this case, 23 is what looked the best. And then I essentially did a mirror plane, mirrored it, and that was it. So if you wanted to make a tread pattern on a tire, it's not that difficult. It's a simple sketch, emboss, circular pattern, and then mirror. Most tires have a symmetrical pattern. I know some do not, but if you want to do the same. And then for the wheel, this was a CAD file from Kansei, signing an NDA obviously, and then using Kansei wheels on all of our builds. It's really important to have the model and the size of the wheel, the barrel. The barrel, we actually had to make knuckles that essentially fit perfectly to their wheels, and their wheels are interesting. They have a larger barrel than usual for an 18. This area offers more clearance, so I was actually able to fit and get some better kinematics out of the Corvette kit due to using these wheels. And then there are some wheels that you actually can't run on the Corvette Pro kit, which is just an interesting point. And I didn't know that until I started messing around with getting the perfect setup, that I think it was like a Cosmos wheel won't fit because they use a different type of barrel. I don't know what the actual terms are, but I call this a tapered barrel, where it's got one defined lip for the tire to sit on, and then it's like a tapered barrel all the way here, and then you can see it has like a bit of a ridge just to keep the bead. Other wheels have two of these defined like ribs, and then they don't have a taper, it's just square in the middle. What are the purposes? I'm not a wheel designer, so I'm not sure. This one I prefer. This one seems to hold low pressures better as well. because as soon as you, like the bead actually takes a while to break off of this barrel, but if you have two lips like this one, the bead can be broken quite easily. So mounting a tire on like a Cosmos wheel or similar styles is much easier, and dismounting and mounting a tire is easier, but on a wheel like this, it's harder to mount, but it stays on better. So I guess if you're a wheel designer or somebody, maybe even Can Say will comment on this one, but why they choose to do certain things for different wheels, not sure. But I'm thankful that they do it this way because it works well for all the stuff that I needed to get out of the wheel. I guess I should center this cap. That's gonna bug me now that I noticed that. We can look at this now. We just finished these with some laser etching and some part numbering. This potentially will be mass produced and sold to the general public as a solution. Essentially whatever you do with a Heim joint, you can actually do with this, other than it doesn't have quite as much clearance as a Heim joint, but in a lot of cases this will fit just as well. But it uses shim adjustments for all of your lengthening and shortening. And the purpose of shims is it uses clamping pressure, friction, and that's what holds it on. It's the same thing that holds your wheel on. The torque spec of your studs with the mating surface of the wheel against the hub, and then the surface area of the bearing or the hub face against your wheel is what holds your wheel to the car securely. It's using that friction and pressure. If you were to loosen all the nuts and just rely on the shear strength of the studs, you'll lose your wheel very quickly. Racing, you'll lose it like almost immediately. Driving regularly, it'll probably wallow out all the holes of the wheel and then shear off hours or days later of driving, depending on what happens. But that's why the torque spec of a wheel is so important. Same thing with these style of adjustment. The pressure that you're creating with the two studs is actually what's keeping this joint so secure and so much better than simply just a Heim joint. So this has really worked well for a lot of updated arms that we're doing for racing specifically, because the adjustment range, the only downside is the adjustment range is much smaller. Typically 15 to 20 mil is about the most you'll get out of it, which is similar to a Heim joint, but with a Heim joint you can just get a longer one, or some where you can just make the threaded body longer. Like, it's very easy, whereas this, you basically would need to redesign the arm or make this block longer, because you can't have an 1.5 inch of just stud hanging out, because you're gonna induce a lot of bending and you're gonna have stacked shims, and the torque of the joint isn't gonna be enough to overcome the amount of shims that you have. So this is gonna be available to the public, I don't know when, probably not right away, but we're using this on a lot of our control arms now. So at least in the spare parts section, you'll be able to buy these for your own setup. And then the pattern and the dimensions of this are all very generic, so it's easy to replicate. So that's pretty much it for this design time. We had the Christmas break, so we weren't working a ton on new stuff, but we're getting back into it. It's early January, we're scanning a lot of stuff, and we're gonna be making a bunch of parts. So we'll have lots to update you on basically next week. So thanks for watching this one. Kind of had to patch this one together for you, but it's totally fine. We covered some interesting things and gave me some new ideas as well while we're talking. So you'll see what we do with this next week. Later. I did an angular constraint from this axis to the origin plane here so that it maintains that angle. Now, constraints is relatively new within Fusion, these types of constraints, so yeah, really happy with that. That's sick. Let's hide this so it looks a little better. And then we'll hide the origin. Oh yeah, that is sick. Really sick. Now I just have to keep this arm from rotating, which is much harder to do because the two ball joint components that it uses are external components that we use in like a million assemblies. So I can't put like a yaw constraint on it. Basically this upper doesn't rotate because I put a yaw constraint. I locked it on the ball joint. Anyways, that's too much information. I'll figure that out too, but the most important one was that the wheel would maintain contact with the ground, and I did that, so problem solved.